what is the human condition? That we are like people chained to the wall in a dark cave. And in front of us, there's a fire. Now, the fire is casting shadows on the opposite wall. You can't move because you're chained to the wall. Okay, you're totally helpless. It's everything is shuttered, everything is closed. All you have is a fire, and the fire is casting shadows. You see the shadows cast by the fire, and you think that is reality. So man is totally removed from reality. He has no idea about reality. That is the truth. He is not aware, completely unaware. He doesn't see anything. He just sees those shadows. And he believes, and that's the worst part, he believes that that is real. So we do not see reality. We perceive only the shadows cast by objects on the wall. Man is twice removed from reality. So literature has often eulogized man as the noble savage. The Byronic hero is described as moody, mad, and melancholy. Look at the words, moody, mad, and melancholy. But the question is whether savagery is akin to brutality and barbarism rather than nobility. Is there such a thing as a noble savage? Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, I think everybody has read it, or some version of it. She created the ultimate paradigm model of man gone wrong, okay? The product of neuroscience. Now we are in a very, very dangerous state. The future of this world is not with robotics. It is more with cyborg. It is more with artificial intelligence. And we don't realize it, but once artificial intelligence takes control, it will be very difficult to control artificial intelligence. So it will be like Mary Frankenstein's, book, Frankenstein, where this product goes out of control. So where are we exactly? We got to keep in mind, where are we moving? Towards what are we moving? Elon Musk very interestingly said that if we were to, if this earth and its resources and, are all destroyed, it doesn't really matter if we can't have vegetables and all grown. We can have a 3D printout of, we can have it all printed out. So everything is moving towards artificial intelligence. Your natural world will not be natural to you very long. It's going to be becoming a very artificial product. And perhaps what is natural will be history very soon. So, supposing we don't take this triangular model of man, where man is at the apex, and we take a circular model of man. We'll think of man as being in a circular pattern. We move away from the world of shadows then and see that man vis-a-vis his actual correlation with nature and environment. We see man then correctly. Emerson, the great American transcendentalist. Now, if you want to read about nature and where nature stands, where environment stands, then I think some of the greatest books were written by the great transcendentalists. And Emerson, of course, is perhaps one of the greatest. So Emerson, the great American transcendentalist, speaks of the circular module for man. He says that man is a spheral man. Spheral means a circular system. Now, mind you, much of the literature of the world, and that too literature belonging to periods which are, not modern, you go back to ancient cultures, you will find that the circular system, time, cycles of time, it's part of the Mayans, part of the Incas, part of the Vedic culture, part of the Japanese, concepts of the movement, organic movements of life itself. You'll find it's always a circle, okay? And most beautifully, what I could give you a very simple example is when you think about your Lion King, you have Simba and being introduced to the entire, the entire species over there before Simba, the little prince, and lion cub. And his father tells him, this is a circle of life. It is a circle, and man is just a part. If you are part of that circle, you are upheld by it, and you could also be destroyed by it. Okay. So coming back to the Sweral man, Emerson says, I suppose no man can violate his own nature. That is part of you. You cannot violate it. All the sallies of his will are molded by the law of his own being. So man is governed by that natural law. Man is not above that law. As the iniquities of the Andes and the Himalaya. So you may have many jagged edges, but still you are under that prevailing law. Now, the perfection of the self in forms of nature only by objectifying itself was self-knowledge. So you cannot know yourself in isolation. You can only know yourself by mirroring, by being reflected. Yourself is reflected back to you from a myriad thousand sources, and then you come to know yourself. So the theory of correspondence is very important, that you correspond to the world around you, and the world around you is your environment, it's your society, it's your nature. You need to have that. So he says that only by taking up all the world, the entire world enters you. It is that empathy. It is that state of oneness, not separation, oneness. Okay, that is the way. That is the only way that you can know yourself. Thus, man correlates with nature, imbibes nature environment, and is sustained. Nature is seen, in the Vedic tradition, nature is seen as supreme. Okay. Prakriti and Purusha together make up the ineffable Tattvamasi. I am that. Consciousness imbibes all, is all inclusive, and that is the way the ancients, especially in the Vedic culture, looked at the world. But this is true of any ancient culture. If you look at their texts, you will come to almost the same understanding. Now, a naturalist, Henry David Thoreau, says in Higher Laws, this is taken from the book Walden, he says that when man has been dissipated, when man has lost his pristine energy, like for example, if you take a lion or a tiger, they are in a pristine state, the energy levels are high. But man, if you notice, is a kind of a, throughout life experiences, whatever the reasons, he's in a dissipated state. So Thoreau says the generative energy, which when we are dissipated, makes us unclean. Chastity is the flowing of man, what we call genius, heroism, holiness. Man flows at once to God when the channels of purity is open. So all of them hint at man having a very, very strong energy base. But that energy base apparently is more or less destroyed by the way we live. And when that energy base, now many ancient traditions call it many things, call it duck plus grants, call it chakras, call it Tao, the flow, the chi, Far Eastern. You have countries like in Japan and China and all. You have Taoism. You have the chi being the flow, the energy flow. So when all that is in consonance, then only man becomes all that which we find him eulogized by. Okay. So nature is symbolized by, in that book, Walden, nature is symbolized by the Walden pond. The purity of the pond, it is reflecting actually man and nature. Now what Thoreau says is that man can be dissipated, man can be destructive, But nature cannot do that. Nature is testifying all the time. Nature may be checking man. Even if you find a storm out of control, it is not aimed at man. It is not trying to destroy man. Nature is always true to natural law. There is a big background to everything going out of control. Global warming causes lot of climate change. Now, if climate change happens, it is due to global warming, which is again due to man. Nature is just responding. We've got to be very clear about it. So, uh, in Walden Pond, Thoreau says that it is the eternal center. So, in order to build an organic life, Thoreau retreated to Walden Pond, the forest mirror, and it's by its sublime shores that the categories of man, the wood chopper is a person symbolic of someone who just comes to commercialize nature. The animal man is a person who doesn't even care what nature is all about, must be educated. So it is always by going back to nature, which is a living category, that you can be educated. Emerson, likewise, in Nature, that's one of his greatest essays, speaks of how nature ministers to man in different ways as a commodity. Nature gives you things as a beauty. Now, mind you, your very idea of beauty comes from your sun, moon, and stars. Symbolic language. You cannot have language itself. Sheer poetry comes from nature. You need it. Spiritual discipline. You see, the ancient cultures were very much attuned to the discipline of nature. They were very aware of the waxing and waning of the moon, the sunrise, the sunset. Everything was attuned with that, and that made for a healthy life. Revelations of the oversoul in mystical moments. Have you seen all your great ones have always disappeared into some natural habitat and then come back enlightened? Because that's where they get to understand themselves. Emerson speaks of two categories of interaction between man and nature: nature naturata, or visible nature. First thing is, nature is seen in a visible way, okay? You can see nature. That is what is, your sun, moon, and stars, and trees, all that, water. And natural naturance, the invisible working of nature, all your physical laws. Did you see that you're part of a tremendous ecosystem, a tremendous scientific marvel that is working with pristine calculation? Every system is related to each other. Everything is correlated. It is such a precise system. That is the interesting thing. Now, now the evolutionary seeker. Is there anything? Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I think somebody just, by mistake unmuted himself. I can see that. Ma'am,
Okay,
please.
okay. The rest of you, are you able to follow? Am I okay? Is my voice audible? Is everything okay with you all? Can you tell me, is it okay? Are they able to hear?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Participants are writing, ma'am. Yes, they're
Okay, okay,
responding.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. I'll go on from there.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So the evolutionaries working of nature is the secret part. Nature is working out. Now, we don't seem to realize this, and this is a dire warning to I think, everybody and every one of us, that we are products of evolution. And remember this: evolution may allow you to be, evolution may allow you to exist as long as you're productive, as long as you're useful. Otherwise, it will wipe you out. That is very, very important for us to understand. We too are products of evolution. So thus the poet, the forest seer, and the peasant all encounter nature are under its sway. So what happens is that the poet, the forest seer, the poet is a person who wants to know more about nature. The forest seer is obviously a very mystical type of person. All these categories of people, they are all governed by nature, okay? And the peasant is the one who is, working in a practical way with nature, because nature is also a practical commodity, okay? Nature is giving you that, so he's working practically. They all work with nature. And the secret here, which is what Emerson has, underlined so beautifully in his works, is that nature and you always interact like to like. How you are, that is how nature will reflect back to you. And this is the great danger, okay? Let's come to that. Now, here he says that nature is the yardstick, and Emerson, in his poem called The Self, he says, wonder at all he meets, wonder chiefly at himself, who can tell what he is, or how meet in the human ELF, coming and past eternities. So by going to nature, he's trying to find an answer to himself. So he is talking about the doctrine of sympathies, that man and nature are interrelated. Now, man can enter nature at any level: sympathy, empathy, or exploitation. Okay. Now, man has been doing in many of these things, like Guy in the poem by the same name. In this poem, and it's beautifully put, belong to wind, world, the toil, and venture, and to Guy the oil. That means the world, the toil, all the hard work belongs to the world. It belongs to even the wind, the toil, that all this effort. Nature is helping man and belongs to Guy the oil. But he is getting it, no? The commercial value is got by Guy. So in that sense, man is all the time trying to commercialize nature. Guy chooses materialism in his interaction with nature. The danger is that man cannot control nature. This is what man makes that terrible mistake. And this is what literature is telling us, that this is where we are. Man cannot control nature, and in the long run, you have a terrifying warning which is there in the poem Himatraya, okay, again by Emerson. Here you have the Yankee landlord. He comes and says all his fields, and he's so proud of it, and he thinks, oh, I've got all this. My land knows me. It knows me. I am the boss. I am the one. So he is, can I take the question? Can I take this question of...
Ma'am, this person is doing it by mistake again and again. I'm noticing that. He's not aware, I think.
Okay.
I'm going to call him and tell him that he's doing that.
Okay. So the thing is, and I would request, once I complete, you can all ask your questions. Okay. So now what happens is that you have this Yankee landlord very proudly boasting, we sympathize, because he's got all the lands under his control. Now you may wonder, is this just a poem by Emerson? No. There are very, very rich billionaires today who are owning tracts and tracts and tracts of land. It is theirs. Okay. So here, this Yankee landlord is doing the same. He says, we sympathize like to like. Nature's under my control. Death adds him to the land, a lump of mold the more. So the final leveler is death. It just finishes him off. So we must have a proper connection with nature, rooting oneself in nature and renewing oneself. Thoreau again in Walden says, so the human life but dies down to its roots and still puts its green blade to eternity. If you are rooted in nature, you have a chance for an eternal renewal, and otherwise you do not have it. Now, we find that in literature, what is the kind of literature which is now very, very topical and very, very important, very seminal? We are undergoing enormous change in environment, but all those categories of environment change can come under one clear category or label called climate change. Climate change is going to bring about sweeping environmental change. And literature is reflecting it, has already started reflecting it. It is reflecting it in an entire beautiful genre called cli-fi fiction, climate change fiction. And now all recent books which are coming up, which have got awards, every single book or work is reflecting back there. We are no longer interested in those entire canons and genres coming down, or even in tragedy and comedy anymore. Survival. That is the most important thing. So, climate change fiction is the most important thing today. Now, in this kind of literature, we have direct references to changing weather patterns, to floods, to hurricanes, to the grave evils of climate change and the degradation of the environment. Now, the triangular model with man at the apex has given way to the circle of life today. If you need to survive, you need to, to be able to survive. Now, climate change fiction, now it's become a full-fledged genre, but there was a lot of references to climate change which we didn't look at very properly. Shelley did it, Byron did it, Milton has talked about it, and a lot of writers have in the past talked about it, but we did not get it all together as an umbrella term. We did not realize its implication because of the pandemic, because of, and mind you, the pandemic is also a result. Everything is related to climate change at some point or the other. Nothing can be studied in isolation. So we find that literature deals with specifically today, we find literature dealing with cli-fi, climate change fiction, sci-fi, that is science fiction. Sci-fi was always there. We have lots of sci-fi literature, okay, a lot of it. But sci-fi literature was also not taken seriously. H.G. Wells was writing years and years ago. But today what he has written has come true. So it's taken together. So we have this very clear triangular structure. We have cli-fi fiction, we have sci-fi fiction, we have dystopian fiction. Dystopian fiction is where all end of the world apocalyptic fiction, where we talk about doomsday, a nightmare world. But is that nightmare world true? Yes, it's very true. It is the truth for quite a sizable portion of the world. Okay, so these three categories, cli-fi, sci-fi, and dystopian, almost give you everything you need to know about society, culture, and environment. Okay, now why is this so important? So dystopian fiction has clearly the terminology of a nightmare experiences. Now, when we look back to literature, at that time, one of the biggest things that happened was the volcanic explosion of Mount Tambora. And that had created a terrifying, a cold or a chill that was prevalent throughout. And even Milton talks about it. That Milton's time also there were climate change. Later Shelley, Byron, all were talking. Okay, now Mount Tambora is the one which has been documented. That is just one of the natural events that happened. Each one had their own precedent. Each writer during his time had faced it. Various events had happened, hurricanes and things like that. And they were aware of it, that seasons were not very natural and were not normal. Thompson's poem on seasons talks about it. So you find a lot of people even if you go to Old English period, you find over there also you have this. You have this epic of Gilgamesh where you are told about this Noah type flood. In fact, every literature talks about a Noah type flood. That means it has happened. It has happened with many people, the rising of sea levels. And now, when we come to Britain, especially, literature, because English literature would be very closely reflecting, what is happening in Britain, we find that with the Industrial Revolution, the entire world moved into fossil fuels. And with it brought every kind of breakdown in culture, society, and human hardship. It came for the entire world because you just moved into another paradigm which was not sustainable. Forever you changed. You changed once and for all. For the entire, known, the world as we know it, you have changed the module because you moved into fossil fuels. And with that began all your industrialization and everything came one by one. And 75% of the carbon emissions came with that because there was no way of, dissipating it. And Victorian times, you have the famous Mill on the Floss, Maggie and Tom Tulliver, the river flooding. And you have this, brother and sister in that death grip, they're dying. It's a very, very famous scene. But we did not realize its implication. Today, such scenes are very common. It's not something new. So what happens is that we, the economy, the culture, the society is facing a silent killer, and that silent killer is climate change. Now, what are writers? Why is literature so important as a kind of documentation of all this? Because they are the social warriors, and it is they are able to catch the pulse of social change. Now, let us look at literature which, fictional and non-fictional, which talks about climate change and which is now very widely disseminated and, understood throughout the entire academia. So, the writing is on the wall. Amitabh Ghosh in The Dangerous Derangement, you will find it in any airport or wherever you travel, you will find it. He was the first, very serious attempt he made to tell people that please look at what is happening. The sea levels are rising, and they are rising very, very fast, and the glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising. And again, he had written this in his The Great Derangement. He had written in 2016, and that is 2016. And then again in 2019, there is another book called Gun Island. And in Gun Island, he talks about the typhoons, the destruction which comes on you suddenly. Now, what Amitabh Ghosh is making a point over is that first thing is nobody is prepared for it. No one is ready for it. No one is willing to see that it is a serious and important element and aspect of our lives and is part of literature. We need to look at it. It is not just comedy and tragedy which is going to get us anywhere, because we have always been lulled into anything. We are fond of stories, heroic stories and all kinds of stories. But actuality is what we are facing. Research must be bang on target about what is happening to in the world you're living. And this is what Amitabh Ghosh says, that this apocalyptic, this end of the world thing is not a matter of 100 years. It could be even 50 years. We don't know. Things are so unstable. And the latest what we have come to know is that we cannot predict nature, because nature has a way of suddenly collapsing like a pack of cards. It's not like, you write it in projects and theory that it will take so much time and by 2030 we'll do this, by 2050 we'll do that. That's what you're writing on paper. But nature has the way of, suddenly triggering a collapse, like the icebergs. They're all melting at a super fast rate because one system collapsing leads to another system collapsing, and the entire ecosystem is going to collapse. Okay, so that's what's happening. So sci-fi, that is scientific fiction, deals with critical issues which are also about man's existence. Now, Ghosh points out that for the last 200 years or so, Western literature has been trapped in a world where human comedy and tragedy are separated from nature. That is a very big, important dissonance or disconnection. We have to be very careful about this. He looks at the power dynamics that make climate debates so different. Now, because power dynamics, political systems, political economic systems, which are, mercantile, that is why nobody is interested in dealing with these topics. They don't want it also. So he tells us that it is because of this power dynamics that we are not able to make headway. But if at all anything is important, this is the most important. Now, recently in your, green summits and all that, they have said that they've already found that 2.2 is already too high. We have to bring down carbon emissions to 1.5 by 2025. We need to be way down, but already projects for which finance and the economics and the entire projects which have been funded are already going to push up your climate change by almost 66%. And we already require, for the existing projects, we need 35% more oil and 59% more of coal. So already you're already over, you've already overestimated, and then you say you will bring it down, but you're already going to change things. So exactly what is going to happen? And the worst part is that the giants, the economic giants, are huge companies like Shell, Chevron, Exxon, Mobil. They are all here to stay. And they are the ones, talking on theoretically and on paper. Now, one way is to stop by carbon capture and storage. You can do that, okay? You can capture it at source, but you may have methane leaks. Now, why is it that we need research? Sci-fi fiction is the most serious area of research. We need to do it because it is dealing with things which will now become our life and is becoming our life. Recently, if you are looking at the emergencies that are happening due to floods in Germany, especially the one which happened in Germany, there are new terminologies that are coming in, like climate emergency, okay, and climate trauma. You need a whole section of people to deal with it. There are people who have faced the floods, who are not able to sleep, and whose lives have been completely destroyed. Their families have been broken. Their culture, everything has been destroyed. Everything is gone from them. So we need sci-fi to be a very, very important area of research. And we must realize that we are at the tipping point. So the introduction of new words which are coming into parlance, like climate trauma, climate strikes. It is not just military strikes, climate strikes. They're going to happen. Now, in 2005, it was Robert McFarlane who questioned, where is the literature of climate change? Now it's coming. Now it's coming. When we look at some of these books, they will give us reasons why we have to take this issue very, very seriously, and deep, intense research has to be done. There's this novel called The Sea and Summer, written in 1987 by George Turner. It is set in the Melbourne of 2030. So it's futuristic, okay? And it talks about the rising sea levels and social change, and most importantly, the division between the rich and poor. Now, all this we have seen very clearly with our own eyes when we witnessed last year the migrant crisis. We saw exactly what happened. So, this futuristic work, which has been set in 2030s, actually happened in 2020. We've got that exact scenario. It is happening now in every nation. So, you see how futurism is very much part of your present day scenario. Now, there's another book, Memory of Water, 2012. Now, this is a sci-fi dystopia. It's a dystopia written by the Finnish writer Emi Intraranta, set in Nordic Europe. Now, water crime is punishable by death. Water crime, stealing of water is a crime and punishable by death. And this is a warning because most of the water tables are already gone. Half the world is dry. India's main rivers have gone dry. So our water levels have fallen. So, because runoff water is there, we do not have forests to hold the water. So everything is runoff. It is wasted. Now, it is very strange. George Orwell, in his 1984, he had put it down as thought crime is punishable by death. But we know, and in India too, there are states fighting over water. Soon nations may fight over water because you have certain rivers originating in some other, parts in other countries, and then flowing into your country. So you could have water wars. These are not something which is very unique. It will happen, and very soon. So this is one thing, and the most important thing is that water is very precious. In that book, the question that arises in that particular book, which is the memory of water, is that when we are caught in a situation where there's no water, do we share with our friends and family? It's a very, very clear thing. Any pandemic situation, when you have very little storage of water and food, who do you share with? Will your own family understand if you share it with your friends and other neighbors? You see how everything breaks down, the society, then the neighborhood, everything, the community, everything starts breaking down. So then it's very relevant here because the breakdown of societal values, it is not just war that breaks down societal values. Poets like Louis MacNeice, Edmund Blunden, Auden, they all talked about the breakdown of relationships during wartime. We have got this huge First and Second World War and all the wars that have been fought. We know that it breaks down. But during crisis, it breaks down. Our pandemic is very clear about it. That is what we have seen. Nobody has researched it as yet. But the breakdown of relation would be one of the biggest thing that happened as a result of pandemic, when people were forced to share, to stay together under one roof, where there isn't much and there is frustration and depletion of economic resources. Now, in another book, we have, and this is a very interesting, one more important thing. There's a very famous book, Mother Courage. Okay, many have read it. And there, Brecht, it's very interesting because that particular book, it shows people in a war scenario and all relations are commercialized. And that is exactly what will happen. You cannot talk about cultural value and relationship when it gets commercialized due to lack of resources. Now, and then there is this particular book which is called The Wall, where the shores of Britain are confined within a wall and the refugees are kept out. Now, the refugee crisis is one of the biggest and important crises that happens as a result of climate change. People are driven out due to storms, due to flooding, due to lack of food. They need to get out to survive. And what happens to other communities which are already surviving with their meager resources? You see the refugee crisis. This is happening all over the world. We may be, this is a very, very important area of research because this is happening just now. The impact of close congestion of people wanting those resources. Now, what happens to humane and humanitarian values when you are faced with refugee crisis? We can see what's happening in the Afghan situation. We can see it. We are living in that world. See, literature must be alive. Students of research must be alive to what is happening around you, and it should be connected, very, very connected. Now, there's a book called Clade, written in it is written in 2015 by the Australian James Bradley. He chronicles several generations of family history, and he talks about how relations start breaking down. Okay, it breaks down with environmental crisis. Slowly, relations also break down, and then there is this book by Janet Winterson called The Stone Gods. It was written in 2007. It talks about a future civilization which is running out of time. And why has it run out of time? Because it is about 18th century Easter Island. It is set in that. They have cut their last tree. Now, you may say, oh, but this doesn't affect me. Have you not seen the world if you were to look at it? In fact, recently there was a news about, astronauts looking down at the earth, and they were very saddened because much of the earth is burning. And if it is burning, your trees are burning. And if the last tree is cut down, what are you going to do? It's no longer a cartoon, we have the last tree and a human being breathing out of oxygen, cylinder. It is a very, very happening thing, and it can happen within maximum 2 generations. So it is a world running out of time. And the most important thing is, they say the tipping point has already happened. And that every scientist will tell you today, we've already crossed that margin. When are we going to awaken? When are we going to look at it all? There's a book called The Swan Book, 2013. And here, and this is very important, I think this is an area which I think any sociology student, any student of, cultural studies would enjoy this particular book. It's by the Australian writer Alexis Wright, and she talks about the indigenous people, that the indigenous people, their culture, their values, their traditions have all been wiped out. And if you noticed and you look back at civilizations, you will realize that there were more than 6 ancient civilizations, all of which were wiped out, one by one. Every one of them wiped out by marauding fanatical hordes. When you wipe out cultures and civilizations, you wipe out traditions which are rooted, which would save you during these periods. Because the only surviving culture is India, is the Vedic culture, which is still surviving here, which will give you your Ayurveda, it will give you your roots. And a lot of tribal cultures there where you have indigenous people, you have groups getting back, you have, all the World Tribal Forums all getting back in Americas and everywhere, getting back to their roots, Aborigines getting back to their roots. They are the ones with the bastions of cultural memory, which can save you in these times. The Sushruta Samhita talks a lot about the pandemic. It talks about how the reasons behind the pandemic, the exact description of what happens, your COVID-19, the breathlessness, everything is described. And they tell you you have to leave. But where will you go? Modern man has nowhere to go. That's the problem. Before you could evacuate a village and go to the hill maybe. But here you cannot go anywhere. And again, it repeatedly tells you it's not just the Greeks who said it in their tragedy. It's not just them. The impious did. There's something you have done wrong. You've gone on the path of confrontation with nature. You've done that, and that is why it's coming to you. It's you have, you have overstepped yourself, and that is the most important thing. Now, and then we come to we feel that the problem that has happened is that religions have eroded culture and every indigenous belief system. We need our indigenous belief system because it's a survival guide. It's very, very important. And when that is gone, there's nothing left. So culture, tradition need to be there because if you see longevity also. You look at cultures like the Chinese and the Japanese, the kind of traditional food which was eaten to keep that longevity going. All that is very important. You look at ancient, cultures which tell you that what is the eating pattern, what is the sleeping pattern, what is everything, what you need to do. Modern man may say that staying up the whole night is just what I need to do, but your immunity may be shut down. So how do you build up your immunity? You can't get it out of, you need to go back to your myths, you need to go back to your legends. And mind you, there's nothing called myth. It is collective memory, and collective memory has to be respected. That is your culture. You need to get back to that. So then there is this book, which is very interesting by Barbara Kingsolver. She writes, she's got this book where she talks about the monarch butterfly. Okay. She considers the pattern of the butterflies. Now, as you notice, the bees are dying out. If the bees die out, your entire ecosystem will fall because they are the pollinators of the world. If they are gone, everything will go. So it's a small thing. Your chaos theory will tell you it's a small thing that can cause that tipping point to come. And there is a book by Sinclair, Upton Sinclair, called The Jungle. And The Jungle is where he talks about and in 1906 he wrote it. There he talked about the meat packaging industry, the appalling condition of the carcasses which were being packaged. Now, after he wrote that book, there was a huge furor, and they enacted some laws to stop it. But today, the meat packaging industry, it is not the meat packaging industry, it is animal farming itself, which happens to be the most barbaric and cruel industry ever. And because of acres and acres of land given to that, and also the conditions of the animals when they are slaughtered, they are dying, and the kind of hundreds and thousands of animals packed together, some dead, dying, about to die. The entire whole inhuman, appalling condition is so terrible. And this tells on not just, it's not about vegetarians or about non-vegetarians, because cruelty to animals, if veganism comes and milk production goes, then it will be affecting both the vegetarians and the non-vegetarians, because your butter, paneer and ghee will go as much as your meat and poultry and everything else will go. Okay. So the thing is, but what is happening is the space between animals and humans is coming closer and closer and closer. So there is where your zoonotic diseases, there is where your pathogens, there is where the entire thing begins. So you got to be very clear about it, that you either survive or else you are facing a very, very bleak and terrifying future, because a lot of mutation is happening and a lot of experimentation is happening. Your virology labs, you have till now, the recent one is the chimeras, the monkey and human chimera, which science can go to any length. So what do you have? Half human, half monkeys? What are you going to have in future? We don't know. It is something where We are not in control, but it's very, very important to understand. And literature must reflect back the real world. Any kind of literature, whether any kind of study, whether it's sociology, psychology, anything, culture, it should reflect back the real world, the world we are living in, what we are facing. So there is a very important book which I will recommend to each and every one of you. I think you should, in fact, everyone must download a copy. You will get a PDF of it. It is called The Unthinkable: Life After Warming. It is very, very important. It is by a writer called Daniel Wallace Wells. Daniel Wallace Wells, written in 2019. Life, this is called The Unthinkable. Now, when you research, do you research on things which have already been, which has already been done 1,000 times over? No. You need to go into something which is unthinkable. What is that unthinkable? What you're really heading into, what is very real to you? Number one, heat deaths. He tells you in that book the way people are going to die very soon and are already dying is due to heat deaths. 11 to 12 degree Celsius increase, warming, more than half the population will be dead. Heat deaths are happening. It's happening around you. The other thing which you're facing and going to face, hunger and drought. And we know the terrible scenes from Madagascar. We are seeing. Are we seeing? We need to see if we are not seeing. It is absolutely untenable. And drought is taking over half the world. It is happening. Now, there is a particular book called When Hunger and Drought Comes. 40% of the available diet will be gone from the earth. 40%. You imagine those fancy stores and those mega stores without anything on the counter. 40% will be gone. And that again, you have that, the rich and the poor, who's going to get it, who's not going to get it. There's a book, another book, very important, The Population Bomb. It is by Stanford professor Paul R. Ehrlich. He says, he and his wife Anne have written it, and they wrote it in 1968. He says that famine will come due to worldwide population because the population over 7 billion, it is double, then will triple, it will go on. The earth cannot sustain. There is no food. These are realities. These are facts. And then it is a ticking time bomb. It's not exactly your nuclear weapons which are going to kill us. This is a more painful death, and that's waiting. So, and what happens is consumption. Where is the food going? People are starving. Food is being given to dairy production, to the animal farming. Animal farms are taking on the land which was meant for the wildlife. Wildlife is completely depleted. And when wildlife is depleted, nature will hit back because the entire ecosystem is gone. So you find that if you want to sustain yourself, dairy farming and animal farming must be cut in half by 2050. Are you going to reach that target with your overpopulation, which is going on exploding? The other thing, most important, drowning. Drowning. All these are listed one by one. Drowning. The rising sea levels are going to kill people. Now, there is a book by Jeff Goodell, and this is the book, The Rising Sea Level. And the book is subtitled The Sea Kills, Rising Sea Levels. It's a book by Jeff Goodell, and he tells that generally you have a couple of inches, 6 to 8 inches. Now, when the oceans rise 8 meters, what happens to areas like the Maldives? What happens to Bengal? What happens to Marshall Islands? What happens to South Florida? They all get inundated. So it's a terrifying thing. We are just on the verge of that because it is happening. The oceans are rising because the snows are melting. Now we can change the trajectory. We can stop it to some extent, but we cannot stop it altogether. It will happen. There's nothing much you can do it. And it. What is the subtitle of the book? The book subtitle is, it says, Rising Sea Levels, Sinking Cities, and the Remaking of the Civilized World. That culture which you are so proud of as a civilized nation is gone because you're going to start all over again, if at all there's anyone left. And then the wildfires. The wildfires, you've got California, you've got Australia, you've got so many. Even in India, there are so many places which are, suddenly combusting. And again, the refugee crisis. Refugee crisis is the main thing. People running because of climate change. Where will they? And if you have floods, we've got it in Assam, we've got it in low-lying areas in Meghalaya, Khasi Hills, Garo Hills, everywhere. The low-lying areas are all getting flooded. And then you see, the strange part is it's not a natural disaster, it is man-made. And freshwater drains. All your freshwater systems have turned into drains. Where is your water coming? And then the dying oceans. The dying oceans, nature has a green lung, that is your trees. It has a blue lung, which is your oceans. You have completely littered the oceans. So you're burning your air is totally unbreathable in areas due to whatever reasons, farming and burning of produce or whatever it is. So you have the last and most dangerous of all, the zoonotic diseases. They have started coming, all your SARS, your COVID, every single one of them. You have so many names, one by one, mutations, combinations, permutations, every single one of them. Now, what is happening is economies will collapse, and then there will be climate change conflicts. People will conflict with each other. Nations will fight over this. And this is all in the offing. Now, what happens is, so the world today is deconstructing itself. It is deconstructing itself piece by piece, dismantling itself. Your final deconstruction is not your literary fantasy. It is the world itself happening right in front of you. So, what new structures must emerge? What lessons must we learn if we have to get out of this? What do we do? Films like Interstellar, the Game of Thrones, talks about the winter is coming. Interstellar talks about environmental degradation. The question, where do we go from here? The forgotten wisdom. Earth's lost civilizations. We need to get back. We need to get back that understanding that sees the world, the earth, as a living entity. Very much intelligent, super intelligent, governed by total cosmic intelligence, which is far above yours. You need to learn from that. And there's a book by Graham Hancock called Magician of the Gods. 2005, it was written. In that book, he talks about the incredible ancient civilizations which were there. We need not ever think about us as advanced or anything in comparison to any simple, even take an ancient temple down south. The kind of architecture, the chiseling, the stonework, masonry, obviously it's a work of an advanced civilization, not a work of a rudimentary civilization. So we need to rethink the entire ethos. We need to understand that every part of the world boasted of advanced civilizations. You need to look back. You need to see the amount of engineering and technology which was there. And you need to understand and take your place in that entire pantheon. You are not at the apex. You belong to an entire civilization, a tradition of civilizations that have gone before you. And many of them are very, very advanced. And above all, you have to change your belief system. There is a great book, uh, The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And in that, he says that it is your belief, your circumstances that control your DNA makeup. It is not your DNA that controls you. So, very latest research is coming up, which tells you very, very clearly that you need to make a very, very important. You need to understand yourself and make those changes. You need to look back. If you look back, when you think about this period, the Mayans had talked about this period. They called it the time of no time. That is the way they looked at this period. And they called it a period of a time of madness, discontinuation. And this is a time when new energies are emerging. So it will bring about enormous psychological, mental, sociological, all kinds of change. And you need to deal with it. And the most important thing is that unless we root ourselves and get back our ancient traditions and knowledge and experience, it will be very difficult for us to go forward, because our contemporary masters of our economics and political systems really are at as much at a loss as we are. Okay, so I think a lot of our work, our literature, our understanding, our knowledge has to be looking at what is happening. I am supposed to, talk to you all. I've got a lecture scheduled, 2 more are there. So in this particular one, and they seem to be going in a kind of a trilogy, because in this particular, talk, I just wanted to awaken you all to the kind of reality which is the bedrock of any form of research. And, research comes out of looking at squarely what is happening. And I think it is better not to use the Shakespearean module of being at the apex, but rather, be with reality of the Platonic model, that we are quite far removed from reality. And we need to look at it, we need to see it. And perhaps maybe in the next time, we can look at many other aspects of the same topic. I think for now, for today, I think this much, because it's almost, I'm supposed to give you all a little bit of time to, interact. So I would like you all to, give me your questions, and anything you would like to, please feel free to interact.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable insights, ma'am. So I request the participants to come up with questions. If you have any questions or any kind of thing that you want to discuss with our resource person, you are welcome to do so. Meanwhile, is Manjit Chutia here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let us give some time to the participants to frame their questions or any kind of thing they want to discuss. But before that, I would like to request Monjit Jutia to summarize ma'am's lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to all. It is great honor to me summarize to this workshop presentations by the resource persons, Professor Sujata Gurudev, ma'am, about the topics restructuring society, culture, and economy in keeping with the pandemic, which has been organized by Department of English of Berlin University for the benefit of faculty members of various universities, colleges, and research scholars and students. Distinguished research persons, Professor Sujata give give an idea about the society, culture, and economic relation about the literature. Uh, in uh, In society, Madam described about dominant of men by the society and theological perspective of men, trying to human motivations. What are men done society, culture, and economy? Uh, psychology, psychology of men's by governed by natural laws, global warming of natural climates, evolutions of natures, natural climate and pandemic, social changes, historical, political system of power, economic system of power, and humanities values. Uh, Whatever the topic that has been delivered by distinguished research persons is very informative and significant one, and also it is very